All right. Thank you very much, Carsten, for your kind words. In this session, we're going to talk a little bit about architectures. Should be interesting also for a core developer, Apex developer, because you all need a basic knowledge about the Apex architecture. What kind of architectures are possible? Yeah, and one size fits all is the question we'll soon be answering. Yeah, my name is Niels DeBruijn. I'm a business unit manager responsible for low code as such at MTRG. I'm a Dutch guy, although I live in Germany for a very long time now, but I actually was born and raised in the Netherlands. And yeah, I sought out for a nice wife, and I found one in Germany, so that's why I came over to Germany. Got married, got 3 daughters, and I'm living in Ratingen. And as Shakib was talking about Reston, where that lies, Ratingen is nearby Düsseldorf. And you could say that at MTRG we have our Apex headquarters in Germany. Yeah, I'm responsible for all the low-code activity in the company, together with a team of colleagues. Carsten also mentioned 40 people we have now on board, so that's growing steadily. We have an own portal on which we share our knowledge with, which is called apex.mt-ig.com. So have a visit over there. There are some nice tutorials there, YouTube videos and stuff. Yeah, I've got a long track record with Apex. Carsten also mentioned that. And I'm also a certified professional, and I'm an ACE director, which basically means I do a little bit for the community. And that got recognized by Oracle, which is great. And also talking about giving back to the community, I'm also very active at DOAC, which is the German Oracle user group. And here I'm a director of the development community, and I'm also the initiator and held the conference chair of our 3-day conference, Apex Connect in Germany. And last year we had 380 people attending this conference. But as you all know, of course, there is the corona thing going on. So we had to actually cancel the conference after hard work putting it all up, which is very sad. But I've got an alternative to announce for those of you who are not on Twitter. We have planned our online edition of Apex Connect that will be held on the 5th and 6th of May this year. The schedule is coming up soon. We've got loads of sessions planned, and it's free. Yeah, just like Apex at Home is, it's completely free. So I'm looking forward to that event. The registration should open soon, and you can have a look at the website apex.doac.org. And anytime soon you can actually start registering for this. So it's completely free, and all sessions will also be recorded. So if you're not in the appropriate time zone, because this is held in Europe, or you don't have any time, please feel free to afterwards have a look at the recordings. Okay, so my slides, if you're interested in my slides, I've put them already online on our Knowledgebase website, knowledgebase.mt-ig.com. There's also a direct link on the bottom of this slide where you can actually also download all the slides, or you can look at it inline. And I actually want to briefly mention this Knowledgebase, mt-ig.com, because it's actually a quite nice site. And when I open up here, you can see the slides in line of the application. And it's actually a very good use case for a faceted search being used on this site. So we had an internship, someone doing an internship at a company, and he took like 2 weeks to put this site all up, which is really great. You can actually search for it, or you can actually use the facets here to enter a tag and look for more information. So if you're interested in Apex content, have a look over here. There is loads of content here inline that's coming from various sources, not only content coming from our company. So that might be of interest for you. So let's start our topic, Apex architectures. As you can see, all those buildings look a little bit different, and they're all designed for a different purpose. And the same is true for Apex architectures. So you have different kinds of possibilities. I would like to show you some of the possibilities you have, and we also see in our customer projects. And so you can take advantage of that. So let's start. Yeah, first, why build yourself? Get cloudy. So if you're looking for a quick way to start up with an Apex environment, a cloud version might be the right option to start off. So you don't have the hassle to install it all yourself, and you can take advantage of some free services as well. So if you're not complaining about data residing in the cloud, then I would definitely have a look into that. Of course, you can start with apex.oracle.com, which is the quickest method. It takes you like 2 minutes to set this up, and it's completely free, but it's not for production purposes. So you have also some limitations in place, like 25 megabyte storage, no backup plan, stuff like that. So it's nice to start up with for training, for doing some demos, also with the latest version of Apex, which is running on 20.1 right now. So that's a great way. If you're looking at more options in your architecture in the cloud, then I would suggest try out the Oracle Cloud Free tier. Dimitri had already a presentation during Apex at Home regarding this topic. So if you missed that one, I would suggest to have a look at this recording. And there's a website for that. What you get basically is at least 2 databases with each 20 gigabyte of uncompressed user data. But bear in mind that this is excluding the my system data. So if you have some kind of gigabytes installed as system data in the sys table space, that gets deducted from the 20 gigabytes. So you have actually a little bit less than 20 gigabytes of uncompressed user data available for each database. Yeah, what is the drawback of this free tier version? Because you don't pay any money for it, you don't get a backup plan. So you have to implement a backup plan yourself. You have also the drawback that if you don't have any activity for like 7 days, then automatically your instance will be stopped. And you can immediately resume the instance, but you have to trigger it. And if you have it for rest for a long time, then automatically your instance will get dropped. So Dimitri also here has an excellent blog post series he has written about this. So have a look at that. You get all the various kinds of tips and possibilities within the free tier regarding the Apex installation. So it's quite nice, but we have also seen, and they are still valid, some nice alternatives. I've listed some of them here. Possibly this list isn't complete yet, but Max Apex, Reference, Skill Builders, Encifa, but also a machine image on AWS is available with Apex. So if you're looking for ready-to-go environment with Apex for a small budget, that can be a really good alternative. Otherwise, I would say you go for the Oracle Cloud Free tier. So this is all about the cloud options you may have. But as we all know, many data centers at customer side are not in the cloud. So they have their own machines and they have own maintenance on the machines. They install the software themselves. So at some point, it can be that you have to install the Apex environment yourself. And before doing this in a real big machine, you can also try it out on your own laptop to get started. So how does that look like? You have your laptop installation, take you maybe 2 hours in total. You install the Express Edition. It's still on the version 18C, that's the latest version, but there should be a new version coming out this year of the Express Edition. And with the Express Edition, you get 12 gigabyte of data for free. And then you can install the latest Apex version in that PDB. I would suggest always to install the Apex version in the PDB. Load the static files of Apex in that PDB and then configure your backup process. Of course, you should test your backup process and recover also from it to see if it's all working and if you're really competent with it. So that's the steps to undertake. It's very lean, I would say, not much to do, and it works pretty great. So also for demo purposes, more or less on your laptop, I have it, for instance, running in a virtual machine. It's a great alternative. And if the next version of Express Edition arrives, you can actually transport those pluggable databases to the next version. So that should be an easy job to do, to transfer to the next version. So I would recommend also to have a look at the blog post from Johannes Arends. He did a great writing on maintaining, administrating also the Express Edition of Oracle. Okay, so now we're warmed up on a laptop. So let's take it to the next level. So you have all those nice machines running in your data center, and you would like to have a proper development, test environment, and production environment installed. So this is I would say, the minimal server installation. This will take you about 8 hours in total. And it comprehends or consists of the various steps here outlined. So you have an Oracle Linux server. You can install it directly on the server, or you take a CentOS machine. You can rent those for like $13 each month, and then convert CentOS to Oracle Linux. There's a nice script for that. You can see the link on the slide. And as soon as you have Oracle Linux in place, you can install the database, you can install Apex, Tomcat, and configure deploy ORDS on Tomcat. I would suggest for those proper environments, so dev, test, staging, production, I would also always use Tomcat as an application server. We have made very good experiences with it. And also use ORDS. So there's also other gateway possibilities for interacting with Apex, but ORDS is certainly the way to go. Then, of course, the backup and recovery process is part of it. And, of course, to secure your communication with the server, you should always install an SSL certificate, in this case in Tomcat. No matter if you have an in-house environment or you have an external public environment, communications should always be secure. So in this case, with an SSL certificate, therefore enabling HTTPS. All right. So what I would suggest is go one step further. So in this case, I would not actually install ORDS on the same machine as the database server. Most clients already have this in place, so they have the database server separate from the ORDS machine. The ORDS machine is most likely a virtual server, so they can easily spawn a new image if they need to. And they can also do cold failover on the image level if they like to. So in this case, you have the same steps as seen as the previous slide, but then you have to install also a proxy server in front of ORDS, which is running on a separate server. And the reason to install a proxy server like Apache Web Server, Nginx, or IIS which is part of the Windows Server, is for flexibility reasons. So imagine a case you're having to stop Tomcat because you would like to upgrade Tomcat. Then the proxy server is still running, and requests coming from outside for an Apex page, those users still would get a proper message saying, okay, we're doing maintenance work, and they're not getting a hard message, error message back. So this is one of the advantages you would have, but you can combine both advantages of both worlds. So there are certain advantages that Tomcat has, and there are certain advantages a proxy server has. So you can combine those two. I would suggest disabling direct communication with Tomcat. So normally Tomcat, if you deploy it, it runs on port 8080. But if you have a proxy server in front of your Tomcat, I would configure it in a way that it runs on your local IP address of the server. So no external communication is possible anymore directly with Tomcat. So each communication should go to the proxy server. There's no real performance penalty by using also proxy server. Some customers also have a hardware load balancer in place that acts like a proxy server, but that depends also on your budget, what kind of way you would like to use and set this up. So this is like the recommended server installation, I would say. So if you're proficient with it, I would say like 9 hours it would take you to set this up, those steps. And we've seen this at maybe 20, 30 installations. So this, for me, this is like the standard way to go. So what about single sign-on? I would suggest to always enable single sign-on for your Apex environment and the apps that are running on your Apex environment. There are actually two reasons, big reasons to do this. Actually, for one person's purpose would be security. So I still see a lot of environments where the authentication is being done using the authentication scheme LDAP. You should actually not do this because you have, most of the times you have a technical user that's being stored for the communications with Active Directory or some other LDAP server. And on the other hand, you have the end user entering a username and password of Active Directory, which is the corporate password that is being used for all the other applications within the corporate as well. And these credentials are going over the network to your database server. So I would not recommending doing that. Instead, I would actually install single sign-on to prevent using the LDAP authentication scheme within Apex. Another reason would be productivity, because each time I install and configure single sign-on at the customer side, the people start to smile as soon as it works. Yeah? Why? Because we all know that like logging on in your Apex environment like 50 times a day will cost you time. And if you could actually enter the URL in your browser and you're immediately logged on, that would save you time in total. So this is also great for productivity, also as an acceptance criteria for your end users to actually enable single sign-on. So there are multiple ways to actually enable single sign-on for your environment, and I would like to go through 3 of those. So the first one would be my favorite one, which is using the OAuth2 protocol or OpenID Connect. They are more or less the same. I won't go into details in that, but Apex supports both methods, OAuth2 and OpenID Connect. So if you have an authentication provider that is able to communicate for authentication purposes through OAuth2 and supports this, then I would go that way and implement that. So why is this? I see a change now over the years. A lot of customers are accepting or adopting Azure Active Directory right now because of Office 365. So they are already familiar with the log-on process of Microsoft Azure AD. They might have also features enabled there in that Azure cloud environment, like application proxy, self-registration, or two-factor authentication, which is getting more and more in common. So if the users are already used to that process, why not actually let application or Application Express be another environment next to Office 365 to do the authentication using Azure AD with OAuth 2. And Apex supports this already natively. So I've got this all written down in a step-by-step guide. Have a look at the document. The link is here on the slide. And let me know if you have any questions around that, or if you have any problems. I will be happy to help you. So basically how it works is you have a request coming from the browser that goes to Apex, and Apex says, oh, you don't have a session ID yet, because for a proper session you need a session ID and you need a session cookie. So Apex redirects the user to Azure AD. At Azure AD, the user is being logged on, and an authorization code is then being redirected back to the Apex environment. So Apex now has an authorization code and actually sends that internally to the Azure AD, and then gets an access token. And with that access token, it also holds the username of the Apex user, and it then can create the Apex session. So this is only happening back and forth for the first time. As soon as you're logged in Apex, of course, then no communication with Azure AD is then needed anymore, as long as your browser session is still alive. So the next version, or the alternative, would be using Kerberos. I would call this legacy right now. So it's still a valid option if you don't have ADFS, or if you don't have Azure AD active in your company. So you can use that. And I've written a very comprehensive document that was downloaded like thousands of times already in the last years. And it will explain step by step what to do to set up Kerberos. There are actually two variants in there. One is with Apache Web Server, and one is with IIS. So if you have a Windows server, I would say that you should use IIS to get the Kerberos authentication done. If you're using Apache Web Server, then you can use a module like mod.kerb for that to use the Kerberos authentication on the Linux environment. So the communication in this case is like the browser is already logged in. So the client PC, and normally a Windows PC, is already logged in the domain. And with that, it gets a Kerberos token. And this Kerberos token is being sent to the Apache Web Server whenever you access the Apex environment. And then in this case with Apache, takes care of it to check with the domain controller if that Kerberos ticket is valid. And when it is valid, you get another Kerberos token. So that is then being sent for the next request. And then you're allowed to go further. So only authenticated users are being allowed to actually access OADS and go into the Oracle database, which can be an advantage of certain cases compared to OAuth 2, where each request certainly goes into the database. The last option you would have would be to use SAML2. I would definitely call this legacy, but there are still authentication providers out there that don't support the OAuth 2 method. They only support SAML2. So in that case, I have a third document in place where you can follow those steps on there to actually set up your authentication of the Apex environment against an SAML2 authentication provider. That can also be Active Directory if you like to. We have done this at a customer site already. And in that particular case, we brought it even one step further. They had a big 5 IP load balancer there, and they configured it in such a way that they did the authentication over there against Azure AD. So this might be an option for you in certain cases, but I would definitely recommend to use OAuth2. The communication process in this case is a little bit different. We don't have the token going back and forward. So a request from the browser goes to the Apache web server. And then it all works with encrypted XML messages. So an encrypted XML message is being generated, and that can only be read by the Apache web server after authenticating with the Azure AD. And then for that reason, also no back-end communication is needed between the Apex environment and Azure AD. So it has some certain advantages, but as said, I would definitely say that OAuth2 is the way to go in most cases. So for those of you that are a little bit confused, what about OAuth2, Kerberos or SAML2? I have written down as a recap my recommendations, and in that order. I would definitely use OAuth2 if you have an authentication provider that supports it. You can use the social login feature. You get extra data during authentication. So if you need a cost center or you need some email address or whatever, during authentication you can get this actual this extra data from the authentication provider. And it works both inside as well as outside the corporate network. So we had also various customers that have their authentication provider inside the corporate network. And as an Apex environment, we authenticate against that instance. So the name social login within Apex is a little bit confusing, I would say. Normally you would say it's only applicable to Facebook, Google, and stuff like that. But you can actually really good use it for Azure AD or other custom Java implemented authentication providers that run inside your corporate network. What it also supports, and which is really great, is changing the authentication method in runtime. So suppose you have a situation where you have not all the users running in Active Directory. You have some user accounts stored locally in your table. Then you would easily want to switch between the authentication methods. So do I want to actually use social login, or do I want to have a normal Apex authentication scheme in place, or a local table with custom authentication? So with a URL parameter, you can actually switch between those, which is great. It has only one drawback in the moment with the current version of Apex still. But this is planned to change in the future, is that you first need a public page to run that, to get a session ID of Apex. And after that, you can use the URL parameter to actually change the authentication method. So you cannot directly call the URL with the parameter in there saying, hey, I want to do a different authentication method. You first need to have an Apex session ID there for that in place. So the second option I would prefer is Kerberos, and then you use a proxy server for that in front of it. But there's also one drawback there. We had some certain situations where a user belongs to many groups, saying like 100 groups in Active Directory, and then the Kerberos ticket gets really big. Yeah, and it gets that big that the Apache web server is not able to handle it anymore. So it actually cuts the Kerberos ticket, so it cannot interpret it anymore. In that case, the authentication won't work anymore. So be sure before you implement this, take already a user in place that has a lot of user groups he belongs to, and make sure you test that out before you actually go into production with this setup. You won't have this problem with OAuth2, by the way. The SAML2 is what I said before. You can do it, it works, but I found it a little bit cumbersome to set up with XML communication, and it really feels like latency. So if you really need to, you can do it. Otherwise, I would go for OAuth2. So my last point would be about high availability. So we have not talked about high availability yet. So I have one architecture also I would like to share with you, which shows how a high availability architecture could look like. As the door says, yes, we are open. And if you're looking for a solution that needs to be open, available for 24 hours, 7 days a week, then this could be an option for you. It is not the only option, but it could be an option. So in this case, we have a different setup. Of course, it's a little bit complex, complicated. And you need also various kinds of specialists for this to work. So let's start on the bottom. You see the Oracle RAC, the real application cluster. That's something most of you, I think, are aware of, how this works. You can do several presentations on that topic alone. But in general, it makes sure that you have high availability in place on database level, which is great. But of course, you need a storage for that. You need an extra piece of software, clusterware, and that. So it takes some time to set this up. It's not something you do in like a few hours. And of course, if you're working for a bank or stuff like that, so these branches, they also have the need for disaster recovery, due also to legal reasons. So most of the times they have more than one data center in place, and then all the messages are being transferred from one database to the other one in the data center, the second one. And this can be achieved using Oracle Data Card or some kind of other method. So this, you can actually duplicate this whole architecture as seen here on this slide in your second data center. To make this disaster recovery in place. So when we have a look at the Kubernetes cluster, Docker, I assume you're already familiar with that. Roel Hartman did some great presentations on Docker already. So I suggest you have a look into that. And the nice thing with Docker is you can actually run various kinds of services in there. And you can bundle them together as one service that is made highly available by Kubernetes. And Kubernetes is a cost-free open source solution you can use. It has some masters running in the background that make sure that those services you deploy are actually available and started again if they're not available. And within the service, you have one or more pods, as you call them, with the services running inside of them. In this case, we have the service Tomcat, which you, of course, need. You need the connection pooling with the database, with OIDS that runs on Tomcat. And you optionally might have a service called Web for Web Proxy or other services in front of that. And they all contain different kind of pods. And if one pod goes down, then Kubernetes automatically spawns a new pod for you, running that exact same kind of service you will be needing. So between the Kubernetes cluster and Oracle RAC, of course, you have a load balancer to actually go from one network to the other and spread the packets to the various kinds of servers. With containing the virtual IP. And you have on the outside, you have ingress, where you expose your services from the Kubernetes cluster to the outside world. that being said, as I was preparing myself for this presentation, I had various kinds of talks with some kinds of specialists within a company. On one hand, we had the Oracle Reg specialist, and on the other hand, we had the Kubernetes specialist. And I definitely have to say that if you're looking into this kind of architecture, you need at least 3, maybe 4 specialists to get that all working and all maintained. So this is not an easy setup, and it's specifically targeted to those kinds of business that have mission critical Apex applications running in their environment that should be up and running 24 hours a day at least, or at best 7 days a week. Okay, so some final random thoughts I had. So this presentation was not about security as such. There will be another one coming up. You see it on the bottom of this slide. This is the Apex Security Checklist by Scott Spandolini. So if you're interested in security, I would definitely watch that one. But if you're looking at an internet-facing environment, then I would suggest also to have a look at some other service providers like Cloudflare, because when you're looking at an internal environment, then it's all fine. Yeah? Then all those employees are most of the times, I would say, trustworthy. But if you have an internet-facing environment, you don't know your user anymore. So you can easily have a hacker that does a denial of service attack to your environment. And those service specialists like Cloudflare are actually specialized on that. So they will take care of those denial of service attacks and make sure that your environment on the back end is running as it should be. So if you're looking at internet-facing environments, have a look at those propositions from those services providers. They could actually help you quite a lot. And I know that Oracle also is relying on some of those services. Consider using Oracle Data Card. Yes, if you want to replicate your environment, or you want to do a cold failover of your database. So an active-passive mode, that is an option. Oracle Data Card is only available for the Enterprise Edition. So if you're looking for a Standard Edition solution, I would suggest have a look at dbvisit. They have also a great solution in place to make this possible. Adrian P&G, great guy that has a lot of thoughts and work spent in single sign-on and architecture as well. He had made a great presentation, a webinar, Who's Who in Apex. So have a look at this presentation as well if you're interested in Apex architectures. And regarding Apex at Home presentations, there are a few more I would like to recommend. Of course, Dimitri Gilis already gave his talk about Bring the Light in Your Always Free Autonomous Cloud, but it will be available as a recording, so have a look at that. And upcoming still is the presentation from Martin Giviti Souza about social login, especially also talking about the Google authentication using social sign-in of the Apex feature. And Scott Spinellini I've already talked about. So with that, I'm coming to the end of my presentation, and we can go into questions mode. So Carsten, any questions already? You're still on mute?
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Let me just walk through the question. And sure. I have one question here, which is a good starter. Would you recommend Tomcat over WebLogic, or what are your experiences when talking to customers about the actual web server into which to deploy odds in?
So if I was to work for Oracle, of course I would say WebLogic server. That would be the answer. Yeah, that would be everything. But I'm not working for Oracle, not anymore. I've used to work 2 years for Oracle. So nowadays, I would definitely recommend Apache Tomcat using that. And this is being used in all our Apex environments, at least I'm aware of. And I would definitely recommend using that. Yeah.
Okay, another question is regarding, wait a moment, it's jumping around. So another question is about Azure or Office 365. Is there a way to work with user IDs which are not email addresses? Do you have experience with that?
Oh, that's a good question. So right now, I've always seen email addresses being used, and I believe that's actually the standard in Azure AD. And actually, you should use an email address because an end user is already used to that. So why should we use something else? I can say in some other companies it's held different. And then confusion takes place because still an ad and then the domain name is needed, but in front of the domain there is another attribute being used. So this only gives you confusion. But the email format, as I'm aware of, is actually needed. And I've seen it in all the kinds of implementations that an email address was being used. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So let me look at these. So this was answered. So another question about sign-on. Do you know if an Apex app can use the Google authentication from the always free autonomous database? Or do you even have experience with that?
Well, personally, I don't have experience in that combination, but I know that Martin Givisusa does his talk about Google authentication, and you can also do it from the autonomous database, of course. So no matter if your database is residing on premises or in the cloud, you can actually use the OAuth2 method to do Google authentication. I'm not sure with the free autonomous cloud if you actually have the rights to do everything that's needed there. But I'm sure that Martin can also cover this question later on.
Okay, that's something. The next question is something which might be a recap of some of your previous slides. A general size. So we've seen a lot of architectures in the previous slides. So here a pretty straight question. So we have about 50 users. What would you consider as a general rule? So from your architecture slides, so about for rather small to medium environments with, let's say, 50 users.
Yeah. All right. So every environment, in my perspective, should look like this. Yeah. So this is definitely recommended, even though you have like less users. Doesn't matter. If you don't have the budget to actually have 2 servers in place, then of course you can do this. But in the end, I see most of the customers doing this kind of scenario. But this is not including high availability. This is not including disaster recovery. This is not including security topics. So internet-facing architectures. So, but in a standard internal environment, I would definitely say this is the way to go. Yeah. And you see kinds of variations. Somebody saying, okay, I use Nginx as proxy server. The other one says, no, we have IAS in place as proxy server. The other one says, no, I have a Linux and I want to have an Apache web server as proxy server. So there you see some variances, and also the protocol being used between the proxy server and Tomcat. Somebody is lean on HTTP, using that as a protocol, and others are using HIGP, the Apache JServe protocol, which is a binary protocol. I'm fine with both of them, so whatever suits you, you should take.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have another one here, which is also a great opportunity to perhaps share some of your experience of your Apex development team. Somebody asks, I need a local installation of Oracle database and Apex on my MacBook. What possibilities do I have? Docker, virtual machine, something else? And I think that's a great opportunity maybe to share a bit how are you doing it? So how are your developers in your team building Apex on their local machines, how they are doing development?
Okay. So what I have running on my machine is actually an image, and I use Parallels as software on my MacBook Pro, and it works out great. So I have both a Windows image there, I have a Linux image there, and that's all I need. I know of several other colleagues, they use Docker very intensively to spawn easily multiple Docker images. Which is fine, especially if you need to have all the versions of Apex in place and you need to start up quickly a specific version of Apex, then Docker could be helpful for you. But that's the way I'm using it, and I'm happy with that. So, but you have various options. There are also ready-to-go images on Oracle.com, which you can download and use in conjunction with the Oracle server, VM server. So you have different kinds of options. But if you're really new to Apex, then I would definitely not bother with that. I would definitely go with apex.oracle.com and start developing, because that's what most people like to do and should do. Yeah. But I said at the beginning, I think it's still important that developers are aware of the architecture and know how it works internally under the hood. So that this helps you quite a bit if you're facing a certain problem. Then you can analyze a lot quicker because you know what happens under the hood. It's the same thing when your car breaks down. Yeah, it helps when you have some basic knowledge about the car, what could be the case and how can I fix it. Okay.
Okay, I think one last question, which is of value for really everybody. So you were just saying before that your general recommendation is Tomcat, just for practical reasons as well. Is there something which comes to your mind, a setting, some best practices, how to set up your Tomcat server to have good performance, or is there some best practice which you would say, oh, think about this and don't do that? Is there some real obvious thing which you would like to share with attendees?
Yeah. Okay, so the one major thing I would like to repeat is don't use the LDAP authentication in your Apex environment, but instead use a single sign-on solution, and that should be the standard. Yeah, that's the most important thing you should do. You can actually enable single sign-on also on workspaces in your internal workspace. So also for developers, they can actually switch easily between the workspaces without authenticating again. And the rest, the more in detail, how you actually configure the Apache web server, how you configure the Tomcat, that's all written in the documents I've already in the slides. You can look over that. But besides the connection pooling, that should be having a specific size. That's important. But other than that, it's not really critical, I would say. Yeah. So if you enable caching on the Apache web server, of course you can do that. But what would be the real win about that? Yeah, it's not a huge performance win for an Apex development environment. So as said, my tip number one would be actually to enable single sign-on for your Apex environment and get rid of the LDAP authentication process.
Okay, I've seen one more question, which is pretty interesting, also probably for most of the attendees, and that is a comparison of the architectures you have shown here compared to Oracle Cloud offering. Do you have discussed that with customers in the past, your architectures on premises versus cloud architectures? And if there's some experience you would like to share here.
Okay. Well, it's not really about the discussion cloud or not. I mean, most of the times the database is residing on premises still, at least in Germany is what I see. when the database lies on premises, why would I install Apex in the cloud? Yeah, it doesn't make huge sense. So from a performance perspective, it would be better to put them together, the data next to Apex in the same database. And as I always say, it's like the best architecture is where you cannot delete one component anymore. So it's the minimal architecture that's actually the best. Depends on actually use case. We have some customers, of course, that don't have a database administrator. They have a small budget, and those are using, so some of them of our clients are using Max Apex as an offering, which costs you maybe like $50-$60 each month, and you're good to go. Yeah, so that's fine. And we have also some customers that have rented for like $13 a month Linux environment, and we do the whole maintenance of the whole software on that. So it's more like, what are you willing to pay? What is the Apex environment about? Is this highly critical or not? So of course, large corporations have much more budget, and they invest a lot more in their hardware and in their architecture as well. So it's not an easy question to answer, but I will assume that in the next couple of years, we will definitely see the OAuth 2 authentication method against Azure AD more widely adopted, for sure. And we get more and more services in the cloud as well. But it will surely take some time to get all the Oracle databases in the cloud, yeah, for sure. But yeah, depends on your use case, of course.
Okay, time's almost up. So thank you very much for your presentation and for the Q&A. And it's now 7 to 7.
Let me give one shout out to Christian Neumüller. He helped me quite a lot with the OAuth 2 document. So Christian, great job you have done there and still doing. So keep up the good work. And it's in general a great Apex team to work with, because each time I have a question, I immediately get an answer. And this is one of a kind. So way to go. Thanks. Thanks for having me, and thanks for organizing this.